Hi everyone, welcome. I just want to point out a few features before we get started. On your taskbar, there's a red arrow. If you want to minimize your taskbar, you can click the red arrow and then click it back to open it again. If you have any questions, we'd love to take your questions. There's a bar in your taskbar that says questions. You can click it, type your question, and then submit. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A where we'll answer all your questions.
Right. Well, thank you, Emily, for being the master of ceremonies and keeping us all on time. And we'll go to the, so I just want to begin with a welcome and a hello to everyone who are joining us today for this opening session of the My Footpath webinar series. We're thrilled that you're here, and we just want to thank you for taking the time out of this very busy point in the semester where we can embark on a journey to help us explore strategies, learn about resources available, and really about empowering you in your jobs. And throughout these series, you'll hear from some renowned experts. Today, we have a wonderful person from the CUNY system that's going to bring her thought, leadership, tremendous experience in doing these things to share with you so you can begin to implement these in your own institution. And as higher education professionals, we all play a very pivotal role in the future of our institution, in education, and for the success of our students. And this series is designed to help provide you with some insights and tools that can help you navigate the challenges and seize on the opportunities ahead. And I know for myself, and I'll introduce myself, my name is Jerry Hanley. And the next slide, please. And it's my pleasure to help facilitate this webinar series that I believe is really important for higher education. And after 40 years in higher ed and almost 20 as Assistant Vice Chancellor and Senior Director for Academic Technology Services at the California State University System, and in that 23 campus system, we serve about 500,000 students annually. Then with that amount of need that our students have, trying to figure out how do we serve our students who have stopped out, and how do we then recruit them to come back? How do we re-enroll them so they can start their pathway back? How do we keep them in the programs and so they graduate so they can be more successful? And that student success of re-enrolling the dropouts and stopouts for these programs can really impact your own institutional reputation as an agent of social mobility, which is so important to what higher education can do. So our students can graduate with a degree, get employed with sustainable living wages. The other important aspect when we think about this is when we look at the demographics that are facing college-age populations that are going to be decreasing in the future, all our institutions are going to be facing a challenge of maintaining and increasing our enrollment, which translates into our budgets. And when we look at the students who have stopped out and how we can bring them back so they can continue and complete their education is going to really become a required operation when there are so fewer students, new students who are ready to recruit. So you who are attending this webinar, and if you are also viewing this recording, I'd like to say that when I took on this role in the Cal State system, and I had to reconnect our stopped out students in our Cal State Online, I was unprepared. I didn't have strategies, I didn't have tools to try to figure out how can we do this. And if a wish came true, it would be able to learn from other people who and how they've done these successful programs in re-enrolling our students. And today's speaker is one of my wishes come true. And also the partner who's working with us on this webinar series, My Footpath, is bringing toolkits and partnering staff who can help us be successful. And I'm very grateful to My Footpath to be the facilitator, contributor, and sponsor of this series. And may I introduce JT Allen, the CEO of MyFootpath.
Thanks, Jerry. Excited to be here. You hit on a lot of the points in the market. If you flip to the next slide, this is the whoops, go back one to the this is really the number that we put forth. And so, you know, in terms of my background, this is year 23 for me, serving adult students, and really the number of stop outs, it keeps growing. It's gone up 1.5 million since the pandemic, over 40 million students right now. And a lot of our work is really on how do you get them back. And so we're going to share some of the insights today. And if you flip to the next slide, Emily, you'll see that as we talk about re-enrollment and stop outs, our kind of differentiator and sort of what we do as a company, it's really focused on where do you spend your time. And what I mean by that is, you know, re-enrollment, stop outs, it's kind of like some jobs, some of you may have them, where you can work in that job to eternity and you'll never be done. And the same is true with re-enrollment. So what we do is we use data and analytics to inform where do you spend time to get the return that it makes sense. And so the ways in which we do that is, you know, we use research, we build the support systems to apply where we think we're going to see the biggest return from students. And so that's us. And, you know, we've brought back over 27,000 students, and excited to be here today. And I'm excited for our speaker. So Jerry, let me pass it back to you to introduce Ruru.
Great. Thank you, JT. And it is my true pleasure to introduce you to Ruru Rusmin from the CUNY system. I've had the good fortune to be working with Ruru on various projects and being part of a professional learning community over the last 3 years as we navigated our way through COVID and figure out how do we continue to serve our students. And I can tell you, as the Assistant Dean of Faculty Development and Instructional Technology, Ruru brings exceptional expertise, over 20 years experience in online education, integrating technology into teaching and learning, and serving the students who we are all talking about today, enabling those students who have stopped out but still have the need to be able to complete their degree so they can really get the jobs that will lead to sustainable living wages for them. And so, and Ruru brings a tremendous amount of expertise. She's really taught at multiple institutions, Hong Kong Baptist, City University of Hong Kong, Bergen County Community College, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and now as the Assistant Dean is really taking a leadership role in developing and implementing successful strategies. So Ruru, the floor is yours.
All right, Jerry, well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so pleased to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you and with JT about this important topic, and to share with you some of the work that we do here at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. So I wanted to start off by giving you a little bit of background about our school. So CUNY School of Professional Studies is one of 25 schools in the CUNY system. And so we were founded 20 years ago with the goal of meeting the needs of working adults as well as employers and organizations. And we launched our first online bachelor's degree in 2006. So we've been doing this for quite a little while. Since then, we have been like the online leader for the CUNY system. And we've been regularly rated by US News and World Report in the top programs in the nation for like bachelor's, online bachelor's, for supporting veterans, for our psych and our business degree programs. So we have about 3,600 students in 26 programs, both undergrad and master's degree programs. And so if you look at some of the demographics that we've put out there, you'll see that, I'll just start at the bottom there. So you'll see that our students naturally, as working adults tend to be older than the traditional college age student. So the majority of them are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So they are also, but the majority of them are working part-time, right? So they are busy adults. They have, I'm sorry, they're studying part-time because they have some full-time jobs, part-time jobs, they're doing caregiving, or they have other responsibilities. And the other thing that is interesting about our demographics, which is not that unusual actually for these sorts of programs, is that we have a really big majority of them are female, right? And one thing that I didn't note here, that most of our students are in the New York metro area, even though we are an online degree program, fully online degrees. And so the majority of our students do know the CUNY brand, and so they're from the local area, although we do have students from all over the world. So that's a brief introduction to CUNY SPS. Oops, Jerry, I think you're muted.
Thank you. We have to have at least one of those. I think you're muted in any webinar series, right? So
it just goes with the territory.
Right, I know. Well, so Ruru, one of the things, with, the amount of students, how important is the data in helping you develop your strategic priorities and your strategies to help students re-enroll and complete their degrees?
Right. Well, we have a number of strategies to reconnect with these students, and so I do want to talk about data. But before that, I just want to mention a couple of other things first, if you don't mind. So one is that we want to make sure that in our contacts with students, in our first contacts with students through marketing recruitment, that we reflect that particular population of students and their needs, right? So we emphasize flexibility, affordability, and educational value. And we emphasize also that we specialize in the busy adult learner, that we are a good match for them, right? And so having that sort of like a very direct sort of, I don't want to say marketing, but I want to say we are specialized in you, right? So we are a good match for you. And having particular programs and particular approaches that are going to match their needs. And I want to say that CUNY also has a Reconnect program that they had last year, and they managed to reconnect with thousands of people who had some college, many people who had already been through some other CUNY school but had never finished their degree. And they're coming back to that. And I think one of the more successful or one of the key elements is that you have to have a particular attention and specialized attention to that population. So they don't feel that they're going in the general bin, but they have their path and smooth and easy path for them to reconnect, right? So I wanted to mention that, and I wanted also to talk now a little bit about the data, right? So we do use data to look at where we want to put our efforts. So for example, we have regular reports on the New York metro area and what kind of skills and occupations and degrees are in demand, right? So that's produced by the university, and it gives us an insight into which occupations have openings, especially for current and upcoming graduates, as well as what skills people are looking for in the labor market, right? So we are able to target workers in those areas. We can tailor our approach to them, and we can make the case that getting a degree or even a certificate in these areas there are great opportunities for people who can get a degree or certificate in those areas monetarily and other kinds of outcomes. And we also look at that data, and we form partnerships with community colleges, with students who have been recently graduated or who are, alumni who've gotten those degrees, those associate's degrees some time back, right? And we We can target them and we could say, you know, there's a lot of opportunities in these areas, and if you want to go ahead and get a bachelor's degree, these are the kinds of offerings that we can get. And lastly, we use that sort of data about the skills that are in demand to make sure that our programs match those needs. So those are some of the ways that we sort of try to target ourselves towards this population and towards the opportunities that are going to be open to them.
Great, that's very helpful. Because I'll say many times we often think about we're going to sell what we have in our programs and not understanding what the students really want to do is what are the job opportunities that might connect them, and their degrees become a prerequisite for that. So very helpful information. And one of the things that you mentioned here was the importance of I'll call it your high touch services, you know, being targeted to very specific populations. And I remember, you know, in my job, it was always a challenge of finding out how to get staffing to provide that quality experience and align with the prospects, their schedules, their needs. So how do you maintain an efficient and affordable service within a state institution here? And you know, are there some best practices that you can share with us?
Right. I think one of the keys is to be very responsive to the students and to be very aware of what's going on with them, right? So, for example, one of the biggest sellers and one of the most important aspects for our students is flexibility, right? So this is something we hear from them, and it's something that we see ourselves. And so one way the flexibility is, one aspect of flexibility is that all of our programs are fully online, right? So they're not only fully online, but they are fully asynchronous. So there are synchronous options, but they are optional and they're not required. So students find that very important. And even like some required synchronous meetings can throw people off just because of that scheduling constraints that they might have. So flexibility is very important in your course offerings. And as we were saying before, that sort of high touch personal attention is something that, again, the working adult really needs and appreciates, right? So these are New Yorkers, and so everybody has like at least one side hustle. You know, they might be working, plenty of them are working more than one job, right? So there's no time for really dealing with a lot of heavy bureaucracy. Right? So where do we figure out, how do we figure out like the points where the bureaucracy is going to be an impediment, right? So that's the kind of things that we look at. So we look at, for example, the admissions process, right? And you look carefully at that and you say, well, where are the bottlenecks in the admissions process, right? So for example, I was talking to our admissions director and he was telling me about getting transcripts evaluated, right? So that's something that normally would need to go through the central office and then get sent to us and then an evaluation. So our admissions office, you know, they're always looking very carefully at all the processes and what's going on. And they said, you know, well, that's definitely a bottleneck that we can address, right? So they put into place an agreement so that they could get these transcripts more directly and then we could evaluate them. And so that speeded up the sort of ability to admit someone from like months to as little as a few days, let's say a week, right? So, I mean, it's a real targeting and sort of like a willingness to sort of try new things that I think we are, that the attitude at our school is always like, where do we see issues? Where do our students say they're having problems? And what kind of small pilots can we do to see if we can improve the process or the situation or whatever the case may be? And so we use those small experiments, and then we see what the results are. So getting back to this sort of theme of data. So we see what the results are, and if it's something that's effective, then we go ahead and we implement it. So for example, I wanted to talk a little bit about alternate pathways there, which is the last point here on this slide. So in our admissions process, we have a number of students who may not qualify because they don't have the minimum GPA, right? They don't have a minimum 2.5 GPA is what we look for. And so we built an alternate pathway called Jumpstart, where students could still apply for admissions, and they were able to do a small little program to get them into doing online learning and getting back into study, along with a portfolio evaluation. And then they could still be accepted into the program without the minimum GPA. And the results of this showed that these folks were just as successful, if not more so, than students who did meet that minimum GPA. So that's a program that was put together, it was tested, the results showed that it was very successful, and now that's one of our pillars. So that's kind of like building that alternative pathways is also part of the flexibility. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there.
That's great. That's great. Well, and then I would just add that, Ruru, that's some tremendous examples, and hopefully, what the audience sort of kind of gets from that is that, there are ways in which you can apply this to your own institution. And so it's everything from, take the transcript process. We've had institutions who have the flexibility to kind of move that around internally. And others where the solution was really, well, all right, we need to do a conditional admit so that we could get the person in and on to the next step while the transfer credit process catches up to it, right? So, just different ways to come at it, but it's great to share like the practical rubber meets the road tips with that. So really enjoy it. As we turn to the next slide, I'd love to hear about what you guys are doing with credit for prior learning, because I think this is a really neat example of just how you've rethought it and made it really work for students.
Right. So credit for prior learning is very important for adult learners, right? So they come in with all the experience, and we don't want to treat them like novices, right? And in their educational journey, right? So first of all, our school is very flexible, very open, and students can transfer up to 105 credits. So that already is a big step up for students. We make that sort of transferability of credits as easy as possible for them. But in addition, we have plenty of ways that students can earn credit by examination. So we have a number of exams like the Sailor exams, the CLEP, etc., that we have worked with, we have worked to make sure that they can transfer over. They can earn credit for plenty of professional certifications, especially those earned through, IT, through computer systems. A lot of those are transferable. Other professional certifications, like those that you get through military training as well. And finally, through portfolio evaluation. So there are multiple avenues for students to be able to take the experiences that they've had so far and the educational experiences that they've had so far that may not be within like a traditional college, and bring that in so that they can earn that credit for prior learning and apply it to their journey with us, right? So about 15 to 20% of our students, once they know about it, they work through working with the advisors, they have some form of credit for prior learning. But the interesting statistic is that almost 30% of our graduates have credit for prior learning. So what does that show us, right? It shows us that it's important for retention and for graduation, and that's a useful thing for students. I'll speak to, I just realized there's a little bit more here. I'll speak to some of the challenges if you're trying to put together a credit for prior learning program. Right? So one of the things that you want to make sure that you get is faculty buy-in, right? So our faculty, our academic directors, our programs, they work hand in hand with the CPL office in order to, review exams, to review other kinds of certifications, and to see how they can match, and so that students can earn not only just sort of general education credit, but credit for the courses that are part of the program. So our programs are very invested in this, and without that sort of partnership, we definitely wouldn't be as successful with the students as we are now. The other kind of challenges that you might face are educating students about credit for prior learning. Right, so we have an extensive sort of education program, from admissions to the first sort of contact that students will have with their advisors. They will start to learn about CPL. We have a very detailed website, but not only detailed, but also an easy to use website to say, well, this is what I'm studying, and so, what are some alternatives for gaining credit for the program that I'm in? Or vice versa. Here are some of the experiences or certifications that I have, and what could they apply to. So that sort of like information is very important to make it easy for students to get. But it is resource intensive. So educating the students, working with them, getting the faculty involved, getting the staff involved. But when you see how important it is for graduation, for retention, then it's a it's a cost that you may want to bear, because it does provide quite a lot of success for the students.
And I'd say, at Cal State, it was a academic political challenge, shall I say it that way, to look at credit for prior learning, because there's often not a process in place that help manage that in an effective way. It becomes, trying to get through committees and all this other stuff. And I'm not sure, maybe JT, in your experience with working with other institutions, is this a kind of, let's say, a persistent or common challenge where institutions don't have a process in place for getting credit for prior learning programs in place?
Yes, and so what we see kind of over and over again is that credit for prior learning on its face, it's just complicated, right? There are different ways you can earn credit, and many times they put a person in the pain point to evaluate, what's coming in. And one of the most kind of common things we see to move it along and get some efficiency of the process is to break it into pieces. So that, for example, if you have a kind of standard way you handle military transfer credits, that can be something that you can train someone pretty easily to just read the way that it transfers into your institution, versus a portfolio process where you need faculty to review and evaluate. And so if you put faculty on both of those, it will take forever. But if you split it into a process where you can have a kind of frontline representative look at some of those easier credit determinations, then pull in faculty for the more complex ones, that's one of the ways we've seen kind of a winning strategy there. Great. And then as we turn to the next slide, Ruru, I think it would be great for you to just highlight just how some of this, how do you make it go, right? Because that seems to be a theme of what we're seeing, and I see some questions coming in too related to that.
All right. So I think what I've been asked and what I tried to put together in this slide are some of the key elements, I think, with working with adult learners and meeting their needs. So I'm going to start there at the, what is that, the 11 o'clock point there. So first of all, going back to sort of like the theme of flexibility and accessibility, we deliver all our services virtually, right? So we want to make sure that students are able to access the services that they need with as little impediment as possible, right? So they don't have to come in. We don't necessarily have 24/7 support for everything, you know, like the financial aid office is not going to be open 24/7, but we do try to provide support during those hours when students are looking for that, and offering it virtually as well. You know, our admissions, our advisement, our financial aid, not only are they deliverable virtually, but they're very responsive, right? So I think we touched on this before about how busy working adults can be, and so they don't necessarily have the time to be waiting around for long bureaucratic processes. We try to respond to everybody within 24 to 48 hours, even if it's just sort of a holding response. And so that is, you know, that's very much appreciated. So it seems, I don't want to say a trivial thing, but it seems like a small thing, right? But having that quick response and having a regularly quick response makes the students feel that they are being heard, that they are being, you know, responded to, and that establishes sort of a relationship with the students. They begin to trust you, right? When you are that sort of responsive to them. So flexibility, responsiveness, and then we provide a lot of student support. There's a lot of support for new students, right? So we have an extensive orientation, introduces them to the school, that introduces them to online learning, and that includes peers who then continue throughout the first semesters of the student's academic career. Right, so they have a lot of support when they come in, because many of them haven't been in school for a long time, right? So it's a readjustment to come back in. And even if they have been in school recently, maybe they're not that used to online learning, right? So that's a bit of adjustment too. So making sure, again, this is like, if you establish a good relationship with the students in the beginning, right, then they will continue with you for their whole career. So making sure that new students get the support that they need. Once they're in their classes, we want to make sure they have a frictionless learning experience. So we have a lot of quality control efforts. That's one thing that one of my office actually works with the faculty to make sure that the students have a consistent experience, because they don't want to be wasting time trying to figure out in each course, where am I going to do this or that. So a consistent experience, but a personalized experience as well. So we work with the faculty to make sure that there's a lot of interaction in the courses among the peers, and a lot of faculty presence as well. So both frictionless, but also a really personal, a personalized experience that doesn't make you feel like you're in an online course all by yourself. And some supports we find are very important to have 24/7. So tech support is one of those, and e-tutoring is the other one, where we sort of focused our resources on, because students may be studying at 2 a.m., right? So that's when they'll need those kinds of supports, when they're looking at their course and trying to figure out how to do something, or trying to understand something. And then finally, this is like a whole student experience. They're not just here to do their studies and to get a job. They are our students, and they have a student life. And so we have, we have career services, we have student clubs, all of these delivered virtually. And that's something that we're still working on, right? So the students are the ones that are asking us for, platforms where they can engage with each other outside of the classroom more. They're the ones that are asking for counseling, etc. So providing the sort of student services, again, virtually, but also having some in-person opportunities as well is important to the students. So these are the kind of support systems that we think are key for the adult learner, and sort of areas where you might want to make sure to focus your resources.
Excellent, excellent. And, and one of the things I'm hearing too, Ruru, is kind of, if you start off right, develop the relationship, then it helps getting around the circle there, right?
Yeah.
And there are many barriers that are facing, and what you've described, I know for me, is very helpful in understanding the complexity of barriers that people face. And maybe what I'd like to do now just is pass it over to JT a bit to talk about from his perspective, what has he seen from barriers too as well, and what are some strategies and solutions for dealing with those?
Yeah, no, that's great, and I mean, tremendous setup and structure that you have, Ruru. It's exciting to see all those services. And as you know, so for the audience, kind of looking at, all right, what do you do to bring back stop outs at your university? So, I mean, it really does start with the data and sort of what you have and kind of what's on the board. So if you turn to the next slide, this is really the common barriers that we see just over and over again, right? So you heard Ruru talk about it, right? Okay, we weren't sure if this method was going to work, so we tested it. All right, when it works, not now it's proven, right? But you've got to figure out along the way, what's your internal capacity? How do you get research dollars on it? Maybe you need funds to do some of the stuff. How do you get the buy-in? I mean, this is tough, right? So overcoming this, it starts kind of step by step. And as we work with clients, what we really look for is, okay, what are you facing in your university? And then how can you either apply your internal resources towards it, or maybe partner with us to outsource some of it to give you a jump start to get it moving. As you turn to the next slide, this is one of the ways in which we do it, right? So, Jared, do you want to comment for just a minute on some of the barriers you've seen, and as we lead into this, this slide here?
Yeah. Well, I'd say that, the issues of, I'll say, funding, priority, leveraging internal capabilities. In the Cal State system, for example, there's a tremendous effort on recruiting new students coming into programs. But when I try to say, hey, what about the stop outs? They're already our students. What can we do for them? It was like, well, no, that's not our job, right? And so those are, the complexities of how you have to deal with the histories of past practices, the funding that was allocated for those, really becomes a challenge. And the other aspect is around data. Often our institutional research office is focused on the students that we keep and not the students who have stopped out, and trying to get data from them about what are the demographics around them, how long have they been away, what were the degree of completion that they have. Getting that data was a real challenge. And as we're going through here, I'm realizing that why we had such a difficulty working on this, from politics to procedures and processes and resources. So it's very helpful for me here.
That's great. And so part of what we do around sort of stop outs and to help see the insight. So, what Jerry described, that's almost like table stakes, right? You've got different competing interests, right? And
Yeah.
Ruru described some specific solutions, but how do you do it in your university, right? So, and that's, our kit is designed to help you quickly see some of the opportunities and then break it down and take action. So as you look at this slide, it's really about, well, how do you get the insight? And so it starts for us with a comprehensive data analysis component. Here we partner with the National Student Clearinghouse to actually see a couple of data fields that many of the frontline leaders don't see. The institutional research folks may, but it's often buried and not quite actionable for you. And so our goal is to help you understand what is the true size of your stop out opportunity, and then how does it break down and segment. And critical to success is really, well, you know, let's say somebody says, yeah, I want to come back. Well, how? What's the degree pathway that they're going to come back to? And so that's part of the analysis, is looking at it to say, what level do you need to be at to achieve success? And I will share with the audience that you may not need as much as you think. So many folks are sort of waiting to kind of get the perfect degree programs and everything sort of lined up. But what happens is, if you have enough, you can begin if you prioritize where you spend your time. So again, that's part of what the kit sort of shares with you. And then the other pieces are, okay, well, what's going to be the financial impact? How are these going to come back? What resources do I put on it? What's the student journey look like? So all that is a part of the work to help you as a university prioritize and apply the effort to those students most likely to return. So with that, I think we've got a few minutes left in the webinar, and is it time for questions?
And I'll say one of my questions is, one, how do I learn more about the toolkit, and how much is this going to, you know, at a state institution, money isn't falling from heaven for this. How do I get access to this? And how can I learn more about it?
That's great. Well, certainly you can contact us. You can visit our website. Depending on your setup, so the way that we work with clients is we can do it a couple of different ways. So we can do a full service solution for you, where we provide a team and reps, and it's kind of soup to nuts. We can also provide consulting services, right, to help you sort of set it up internally. But the Stop Out Insights Kit, the first portion of it around sizing the opportunity, is really, there's no charge for that. So if you're interested in seeing what the real opportunity is, we're happy to share that with you. As you get into, you know, peeling the onion back, a lot of time and effort goes into do that. So then, you know, there may be a fee as we go, but the first step is, what do I got? And then from there, you can really start to put together your strategy to figure it out.
Well, scoping the problem is often the biggest challenge. So if I could get help with that as a first step, then it can make my next steps so much more easier, you know, moving forward.
Definitely.
All right. Well, those in the audience, and Emily, if people have put questions in the, you know, where they're supposed to put questions, feel free to share those, and, you know, both for JT and Ruru.
Yeah, so I have some questions here from the audience. If you have questions, remember you can type it in the taskbar and submit it, and we'll answer them right now. So the first question that we received is, what sort of staff to student ratios do you see? And how does that break out for admissions versus advising versus any other staff categories?
You want to take that one first?
I was going to say, if that's a question for me, I don't have those sort of figures at my fingertips. Can't really say.
From our chair, we usually see, when we set up our solution, we're usually at about 1 to 100, 150. What we see internally, and that's students to representative. Our representative, we call them a graduation specialist, and they cover multiple things. When you see it internally with institutions, you know, it's usually more like 1 to 400 or so for an advising caseload, and the admissions can be even higher.
Okay. The next question I have for you all here is, are faculty involved in the credit for prior learning review, and how did you get their buy-in to the process?
Yes. Yes, I would say that faculty are definitely involved because they have the expertise to do the credit for prior learning. So how do we get their buy-in? I think part of it is that this is the mission of the school, right? So people who are leading the programs are academic directors, full-time faculty, people who are the academic leaders of the school believe in the mission of serving adult learners. So this is already like a start, right? And so having that basis allows us to then work more closely with the faculty. And I wouldn't say that there's, it does take some time to do portfolio evaluations, and that is what people think of when they think of credit for prior learning. But that's that doesn't have to be the majority of the way that you do it, right? As JT was saying before, there's a lot of different ways of evaluating credit for prior learning. And so building those and still working hand in hand with the faculty, right? To say, hey, what about this certificate, right? How would it match what's going on in your program? So it's still working with them, but it's not asking them to, evaluate 50 portfolios or whatever it is. Right? So working with them to find the most efficient ways of providing that sort of credit for prior learning for their students. And because the faculty are partners, we're all in this mission together. They are the ones that also, may come forward and say, hey, there's this certificate in the field that's actually, quite close to what we have to one of our courses. Let's talk about how we can put that in sort of the inventory of credit for prior learning that students can utilize. So getting the faculty to believe in the same mission, to understand, hopefully with the help of some data, why it's important to students and how it helps students succeed, I think is the first step. And then once they become partners, then you can really move ahead with that.
Yeah, from our lens, we try to empower the university and just kind of overlay communication where we can. So many times, like the back and forth to get the materials and get it collected. Did they do the right things? And you have all the pieces, and oh wait, this is missing or whatever. That's the part that will drive a faculty person nuts. And so, but from an operational point of view, we're really, really good at it. So we can get it sort of packaged up and ready, and then communicate the process along the way to the student. So it just makes it a little easier for the institution to support a higher volume.
I'll jump in here a little bit from my experience. So first thing that we were able to leverage is we had a policy where all courses that satisfied specific general education requirements were transferable or articulated across all our CSU campuses and the community colleges, right? So you didn't have to go through, a portfolio review of course evaluation and matching up. So one, look at your policies, and that saved us a lot. Then I think around getting faculty involved, the Academic Senate is a very strong and important organization within the Cal State. Shared governance is essential, and faculty will express their opinions whether they have a lot of information or not a lot of information. And what I've found is when looking at such topics like credit for prior learning, spending time educating them, getting them informed about what this really means and what are the different ways that people can represent or demonstrate that they have the skills, that learning outcomes have been achieved that are required for the degree, but it's done in alternative pathways. It's one of the things that Ruru talked about. And spending time before you ever ask them to make decisions about policies and processes is just spend time having them, go through a learning cycle so they're all well informed. And I think that can be, an important step in engaging faculty. Then they're more informed, and then they can be an advocate for what you're trying to do when they're in various academic senate meetings and things along those lines to help smooth that process forward.
I just want to mention that we're a couple minutes past the scheduled end time, so if you have to leave, feel free to leave. Everyone will receive a recorded version of the webinar, so you can come back to listen to the answered questions if you want to, but we're going to continue answering the questions until they're all answered. So the next question that we have here is, do the courses that applicants enroll via the alternate pathways count toward their desired degree program?
If that is a question for me, I will say that the alternate pathway that I was describing is an alternate pathway for admissions, right? So once they have gone through the mini course and have gotten familiar with what things are like, and then they do, as I said, a brief portfolio and a portfolio evaluation, then they are admitted. And once they're admitted, they are just like any other student. So they would be taking courses just like everybody else. And as I said before, they are just as successful in those courses as people who come in through the regular admissions process. But only an alternate pathway for admissions.
We've seen it kind of both ways on our side. And what I would sort of share is that I think that the student will, so for example, there's a student success course or kind of re-entry type of course for them. I think they will tolerate maybe a 3-credit cost that might not impact their degree plan. But if it's much more than that, they get grumpy. So, it's trying to figure out how can you tie the outcomes of those courses to ideally to cover some of the requirements in the program. And we find it works pretty well in like an interdisciplinary type of program as they come back.
Okay, so I have another question here. You spoke about how contact and follow-up can smooth over operational issues. Can you talk through any specific processes where you used communication to make it easier for the student to enroll?
I'll have to let me think about that. I don't know if you have something yourself.
Well, I'll take it while you think about it, Ruru. Okay. So, from our perspective, what we find is that students are okay with things taking a bit of time if you explain and overlay. So if you explain the expectation, then overlay some communication to check in at the expectation. So for example, one of the things that we try to do in an admission process, ideally we'd want to get the student in, meaning admitted, transfer credits evaluated, into courses within 3 days. But when you look at that, for many universities, that's next to impossible, given that there are different departments, there's different processes you got to do to overlay it. So an approach we've taken is set a goal with the institution. Maybe it's not 3 days, maybe it's 10 days. And then work towards it over time, because when you start, you're not going to get there. But what the communication can do is really just help to manage that process, and you can overlay some activities and conversations to get the student excited about what they're doing and coming back and what it means, and sort of waking up and affirming that interest in education to then pull them through the process while the internal machine kind of grinds behind the scenes.
Next question. You talked about using data. What data do you use and who has access? Do you have to rely on institutional research, or can you do the analysis yourself?
Ruru, you want to take that one?
I'll just say briefly that that the answer is both, right? So we definitely rely on CUNY's institutional research to provide a lot of our data, but we have our own in-house, IR department. It's always in demand, right? Because every time we want to try something, we need to make sure that we assess it correctly. And so that's something that we would love to have more resources for, because it will help you to make those critical decisions as well as to sell those programs that you want to move ahead with. But we have to, yes, we do rely on both the centralized office and our own office, but we would love to have more resources in that area.
Jared, what'd you see in the Cal State system?
Well, one of the things is many of our, degree completion programs are run out of our extended education or professional development side of the house rather than the state side of the house, although there's a mix, right? And so a lot of times the extended ed programs have their own data management and analysis that they're doing, and rely somewhat on, the institutional research to try to identify, who are the students who were stopped out, and then they process the data to develop their outreach internally there. So that's, and sometimes, as you might guess, the extended ed side, the auxiliaries units in an institution are often not given the same priority as the state side part of the institution. So sometimes it's hard to get the data from institutional research that they might need. But it's I think ultimately the data gets processed, additional analysis gets done, so we can create, I'll say, selected programs for reaching out to the right people. That becomes the challenge, because you also want to make sure when you reach out to them, and this is what I got from Ruru and JT, some of the things you've said too as well, is they're taking a risk to come back, and you want to make that risk seem assured that they'll be successful. So you want to make sure you're lined up and you're communicating with them. They build that trust. Ruru used that word. That's so important, I think, for them to that might have had maybe not the best experience, that they left your institution in the first place, and now building that trust back becomes a very important process.
Definitely. Yeah, and we see all levels of expertise, right, when it comes to data and sophistication and what tools and pieces they have access to. So our goal really with clients is to meet them where they are and to help them if they, if it's as simple as, okay, what's the query to get the data out efficiently? We can do that. And then many times it's more, if they've got that piece under control, it's the sophistication of, well, how do you look at this? And then how do you structure a process to repeat? So the biggest thing we find is, at institutions, people turn over, right? So, when Bob leaves and the knowledge walks out, you want to know, wait, how do I do that? So that's a big piece of what we try to do, is build that capacity along the way.
Well, I'm looking at the time. We're coming to the end. Maybe, Emily, you want to hit the last slide? Well, first, everyone, there's all the contact information. If you have more questions, these folks are available for you. And today's was just the first webinar. It's a 3-webinar series. And the next part is going to be mapping the journey, identifying stop out points in the enrollment funnel. And we'll kind of reach out to you again. But I hope you can join us, and bring your friends, bring your colleagues, send the word out that this is a free webinar series informed by experts in the field that can help make your life a little bit easier and better. So thank you, Ruru. Thank you, JT. Thank you, Emily. And thank you,
All right.
audience, for those who are still here and who listen to this recording to the very end. We appreciate your time with us today.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.